Item 8.
Item 8. We will now move to the second short debate, and I call on Mark Drakeford to speak on the topic that he has chosen. Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer.
Very grateful to those members whose outstanding stamina means that they're still in the chamber at this time on a Wednesday afternoon. It's a little bit in the short debate, a feeling of appearing on the set of The Mousetrap, where every time you look up from your seat, one more member of the cast has departed. Especially grateful to Mike Hedges for indicating that he'd like a minute to contribute to the debate itself. What I'm hoping to do is to use the next 20 minutes or so for one of the purposes which I think the short debate is most useful, and that is to contribute to the gene pool of policy ideas that we have in circulation here in Wales, and to extend just the level and range of debate that we have about some important matters. And it's in that spirit that I bring forward the idea of a land value tax for Wales. Land value tax is a tax which will be levied on the annual rental value of specific pieces of land where the value is determined by different usages, for example, agricultural land or industrial land. It is, of course, an alternative to existing forms of taxation, not an addition to them. At its most radical, a land value tax would allow for the abolition of council tax, business rates and stamp duty land tax by introducing a levy, as I've said, on the annual rental value of every site in Wales, including all residential, commercial and farming land, as well as privately owned estates. Now, LTV is not just instead of other taxes, but it's different to it is a progressive tax. Council tax, one of the main taxes it would replace, is regressive because it imposes a lower burden on the rich than on the poor, and also a lower burden on rich places than on poor places. And an LVT reverses that proposition. The basic behind the land value tax is that the supply of land is fixed. As Mark Twain said, they aren't making it anymore. As a result, it is inherently scarce. Its price value reflects three things: its scarcity value, the value of improvements made by the landowner, and the value of improvements made by other people, particularly by people collectively through the public sector. In modern conditions, those contributions almost entirely swamp the second. It's therefore right and fair that value created not by the landowner, but mostly by national and by local government, should be taxed. Let me give you just one practical example. It has been calculated that the Jubilee Line extension to Stratford in London has raised property values around the stations by £10 billion. If only a small part of this windfall had been taxed, it would have paid for the extension very easily indeed. And at the same time, while those who benefit from that windfall increase in land values as a result of such development, and they pay more, those whose sites have suffered, because there will be people whose land values have gone down by a railway extension, housing close to railway tracks, for example, they would pay less. It's a form of automatic compensation without any complicated appeals system. And in just the same way, an LVT would pay easily for many other much-needed infrastructure schemes.
The member, order. You cannot intervene, by tradition anyway, on the opening speech. You can try to intervene on the minister. If you could be very creative, you may be able to put the same point. Mark Drakeford.
Thank you. What then are the practical advantages of an LVT? Well, first and foremost, such a tax would be tricky even for the very rich to avoid. It's a hard task to hide land or move it offshore in order to avoid being taxed, whereas incomes and other form of wealth we know are only too easily disguised in that way. For economists, such as the OECD, who are strong advocates of an LVT, there are two other major advantages. Land taxes increase long-term stability and growth by fostering more productive use of capital, and they stabilise government finances by bringing in revenue efficiently and quickly. So a land value tax is cheap to collect, difficult to evade, it discourages speculative landholding, it encourages active use of land, it creates more job opportunities, and it helps create wealth. And here in Wales, we already have in TAN 6 One Planet Development, a policy approach which is sympathetic to land value principles. Is it a practical proposition? Well, we know that it is, because around the globe there are land value taxes in operation. It is extensively used in Australia, for example. It's used in Denmark and other parts of Europe. There are outstandingly successful examples in the United States of local authorities using a land value tax to bring about regeneration in rundown urban areas. Is it a practical political possibility? A rather different question. And I don't want to underestimate the problems of tackling taxation, especially in an economic downturn. And the experience of the poll tax remains one which has scarred the collective memory of tax changes in the property field. Nevertheless, an LVT has an impressive economic and social pedigree. Lib Dem supporters have included both Vince Cable and Chris Huhne, and there is a lobby group within the Liberal Democrat Party that has the promotion of an LVT as its main policy aim. For Labour, Andy Burnham made it a centrepiece of his campaign for Labour's leadership, describing it as an idea so old Labour that it could be traced back to Thomas Paine. It is the official policy of the Green Party in Scotland, where research carried out late in 2010 suggested that a land value tax of 3.16 pence in the pound would generate enough cash to replace the council tax and the uniform business rate, while leaving 75% of Scottish households better off in the process. And we've heard from Simon Thomas tonight that there's an interest in an LVT in Plaid Cymru here too. But land value tax is not simply a policy of the radical left. Free market capitalists and mainstream economists such as Martin Wolf and Samuel Britton have both argued the case in favour. And indeed, on the right of the political spectrum, an LVT has gained new traction in recent times in relation to problems in Greece. Put simply, it's quite difficult to move an Athens mansion offshore, or indeed one in Belgravia, in order to avoid taxation. And here may be a first to begin with, that I can report to you that in the last half hour, through the wonder that is Twitter, I've received a message of encouragement from Nick Bourne, also saying that an LVT is an idea that is worth putting into circulation here in policy-making circles in Wales. And of course, here in Wales, the LVT is an idea with a strong lineage. Indeed, inside the Labour Party, the idea was first seriously advanced by Keir Hardie in his 1906 manifesto to the people of Merthyr Tydfil and Aberdare. Here is what he said in that manifesto. The slums remain, overcrowding continues, while the land goes to waste. Shopkeepers and traders are overburdened with rates and taxation, while the increasing land values that should relieve the ratepayer go to people who have not earned them. 3 years later, a land value tax was intended to be the centrepiece of Lloyd George's People's Budget of 1909, but was defeated by vested interests in the House of Lords and property owners in the House of Commons. Now, in the era of devolution, there may be a chance for their uncompleted work to be brought to a conclusion here in Wales. Now, I don't want to anticipate what the Minister is about to say, but I will not be taken aback if she argues that the current settlement does not make it easy for such a reform to be introduced in the immediate future. But the whole issue of responsibility for taxation is very much a matter of current debate in Wales. And I hope that by raising a land value tax in the Chamber this afternoon, it can be brought to the attention of the Silk Commission, so that that commission can include a consideration, if not of land value tax itself, then at least of the case for providing the National Assembly with powers to reform taxation in Wales in such a way, should it choose to do so. Because here, the part of the United Kingdom with the longest tradition of radicalism, we have no difficulty in understanding the notion that land is common wealth, that land is a resource held in common. As a result of it being fixed and fundamental, it belongs to the people. And those who have the privilege of temporarily owning it should pay something back for that privilege through a land value tax. I hope that this afternoon's debate will help just a little to getting that idea understood and debated, so that we can have some further serious investigation of how its practical implementation here in Wales could begin.
Mike Hedges.
Yeah, I think it's something worth taking forward and thinking about. I think any taxation we decide we're going to have in Wales slightly different to in the rest of Britain. I think it needs to pass 5 criteria. It needs to be reliable. It needs to not be easily avoidable by moving address or by using a different address. It must be not easily avoided by hiding it. It must not breach the Azores judgment, and it must not be affected by English tax rates, so that we don't have a movement up or down chasing after each other. And I think this is one form of taxation which passes all 5 criteria. Whether this is a good idea or not, I think is a matter for a much longer debate than this. But I think it meets the criteria to be something worthy of taking forward and being discussed. And I hope the Silk Commission will take it forward and look at it, because I think it is something worthy of further discussion.
I call on the Minister for Finance and Leader of the House to reply to the debate. Jane Hunt.
Diolch yn fawr, Deputy Presiding Officer. I would like to thank Mark Drakeford for raising this interesting and important topic. In these times of unprecedented pressures on public spending, it's important we look for new and innovative ways of funding public services, and indeed in terms of our financial base in Wales. I agree that taxation is a matter that warrants serious consideration. And, of course, although our scope to make changes to the tax system is limited, we now have an opportunity with the Silk Commission to consider matters concerning the devolution of fiscal powers to the National Assembly. I mean, I do think it's vital that we use the opportunity of this proposition today, and indeed following Simon Thomas's debate earlier on, to expand the gene pool of policy ideas as Mark Drakeford describes it. And we're very fortunate to have that gene pool, I think, here in this Assembly. Of course, our scope to make changes to the tax system is limited. We have powers over aspects of council tax and non-domestic tax, but taxation is not a devolved matter. But we have those opportunities now in terms of the Silk Commission. It's got a wide remit. We remain open-minded on the case for tax devolution. Our aim is for fair funding for Wales, and of course, while tax devolution may play an important part in that, it can only be one element of a comprehensive package of financial reform. And although the Silk Commission doesn't report directly to Welsh ministers, we are looking to work positively with it, help where we can. As I said earlier on this evening, we are giving evidence from the Welsh Government. I'm not aware as of yet whether the Commission is considering the land value tax, but I know with the call for evidence from interested parties that this is an opportunity now, and I'm sure that Mark Drakeford will seek to raise this with the Commission. And indeed, Nick Bourne, as a member of that Commission, I'm sure also will be very interested in the debate, as he clearly has already expressed interest in the debate and these proposals. I think the Commission might want to look at the issue of providing the Assembly, the National Assembly, ultimately, as work progresses with those powers to reform taxation in Wales. And if that's the case, of course, we look forward to not only seeing their future deliberations, but contributing to those considerations. Now, I do recognise the potential benefits of a land value tax that Mark Drakeford has described, particularly for me, the inherent fairness of the principle that it's the person who owns the asset rather than the one who occupies it who pays. And so good to hear again from the Keir Hardie's contribution in those early days in terms of that recognition and as Mark has so clearly described, the fact that the land is our commonwealth and it belongs to the people, and it's the longest tradition in terms of Welsh social and economic history that we should be considering this in terms of the opportunities. I think if you look at the land value tax, and clearly this has been an important learning process for me, the incentives it offers to ensure that land isn't bought just for speculation or left to fall into disuse or dereliction, also very attractive and important. And we need to identify ways and approaches that might boost regeneration, encourage the productive use of land, especially in terms of the reuse of brownfield sites in urban areas to reduce the pressures on our natural landscape. Taxation, of course, isn't straightforward. We'd need a much fuller understanding of any system before we could make a commitment to adopting it. No tax system is cheap to operate. No reform of tax systems, local or otherwise, ever cheap to implement. Of course, I'm advised the economic and social costs of getting it wrong, and we know that can be immense. And obviously, we would have to carefully consider cost and impact of any potential reform of this kind. But I think the evidence that we've had today from Mark Drakeford's short debate and his proposals show that work could be done in terms of the opportunities for considering this further. I think, Mike Hedges, you usefully contributed about that it needs that consideration of meeting the 5 criteria, and of course, it's starting from the practicalities, but the principles that underpin this in terms of fairness and opportunity, I think, has to be the starting point. I think also that over the next few years, there are other changes to affecting local taxation, which are going to put very significant pressures on public services in Wales rather than alleviate them. Localisation of support for council tax benefit is going to have a major impact, present significant challenges for local authorities in Wales. So this is something, of course, that I know the member for Cardiff West is also very engaged in terms of considering those impacts. I'm told in terms of the opportunities for the feasibility for a land tax that we would have to compile and maintain a register of land values. Well, I think that's something we should do anyway, in considering our assets. And we would have to look at how we design a consistent basis for valuing land, which didn't result in unfair regional variations. It would mean preparing and maintaining a register of land values, and we'd obviously have to integrate this into our planning regime. Now, these aren't insurmountable barriers to Mark's proposal, but certainly would have to be considered, and I would hope that the Stilk Commission would investigate the feasibility of a land value tax, and that those challenges could be part of its work. So as far as my response to the debate this afternoon and the opportunities that we have got now, which I think are very prescient in terms of the challenges, the debate, the discussion, the Silk Commission, the wider constitutional issues now that we're engaging across the UK, I do welcome any proposals for change which might help us to meet our financial challenges. But for me, the most important points that are raised by Mark's debate in terms of an opportunity for a land value tax is that it is something that not only in terms of being progressive, but also that it can increase long-term stability and growth and stabilise government finances. That surely would meet Mike Hedges' criteria. And it is something where, if it's used in Denmark, Australia, the USA and at a local authority level in terms of those examples, then I think it's a system that we need to now explore. Maybe, finally, that the Silk Commission is the best place to receive this idea for more detailed consideration. I mean, alongside other issues of tax and borrowing that fall in its remit, but the Welsh Government is committed to giving serious consideration to not only the proposals that are coming through and being considered this afternoon in our short debates, but indeed in encouraging the Silk Commission to take on board that thinking and exploration as well. Diolch.
That brings today's proceedings to a close.